Sarah Bennett stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting her emerald green blazer one final time. Her dark fingers smoothed down the expensive fabric as she studied her reflection. At 35, she had achieved what many considered impossible, becoming the youngest black female CEO of a major tech company, Value Tech Solutions. The morning sunlight streamed through her penthouse windows, catching the shine of her carefully braided hair, styled in a professional crown that took her trusted hairstylist 2 hours to perfect. She picked up her designer briefcase, a gift she had bought herself after closing her first billion-dollar deal last year. "Miss Bennett, your car is ready," her assistant's voice came through the intercom system. Sarah checked her Apple Watch, 7:30 a.m. sharp. She had an important board meeting in New York at 11 o'clock a.m., and her private jet was scheduled to depart at 8:15 a.m. The elevator ride down her luxury apartment building was quick and smooth. Outside, a regular driver, Michael, stood beside the black Mercedes, ready with her morning coffee order, a simple black coffee with 1 sugar. He had worked for her for 3 years now and knew her routine perfectly. "Good morning, Miss Bennett." Michael smiled, opening the car door. "Beautiful day for flying." Sarah smiled back, taking a sip of her coffee. "Indeed it is, Michael. How's your daughter doing with her college applications?" "She got accepted to Howard University, thanks to that recommendation letter you wrote for her. She earned it with her excellent grades and community work," Sarah replied, genuinely happy for Michael's daughter. The drive to the private airport terminal took 20 minutes. Sarah used this time to review her presentation on her iPad. Value Tech Solutions was about to launch a new artificial intelligence platform that would revolutionize the healthcare industry. Today's board meeting was crucial. She needed to convince the board to approve a $5 billion investment in the project. Her phone buzzed with messages from various team members wishing her luck. Sarah had built a strong, loyal team over the years. They respected her not just because of her position, but because she treated everyone, from the janitor to the senior executives, with equal respect. As Michael pulled up to the private terminal, Sarah gathered her things. The morning sun was bright now, making the small private airport look almost magical. Several expensive private jets stood on the tarmac, including her company's Gulfstream G650. "I'll see you when you return this evening, Miss Bennett," Michael said, helping her with her briefcase. Sarah walked toward the terminal entrance, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor. She noticed several other executives entering the building, most of them older white men in expensive suits. They walked past security with quick nods, barely having to slow down. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the terminal's luxury waiting area. Sarah could see her flight crew through the glass walls, doing their pre-flight checks. Captain Rodriguez, her regular pilot, was reviewing weather reports while the co-pilot checked their flight plan. Sarah reached for her ID and security clearance card, documents she had shown hundreds of times before at this same terminal. She had been flying from this private airport for the past 3 years, ever since becoming CEO. Most of the staff knew her by name, greeting her with respectful smiles. But today, there was a new security guard at the checkpoint. He stood with his feet planted wide, hands clasped behind his back, watching people enter. Sarah noticed how he barely glanced at the other executives passing through, but his eyes fixed on her as she approached. Sarah maintained her professional smile, used to being the only black woman in such spaces. Her mother had taught her long ago to hold her head high and let her success speak for itself. She had faced prejudice before, but she had learned to handle it with grace and dignity. Little did she know that this morning would be different. This seemingly routine trip would turn into a moment that would not only test her patience, but would end up making headlines across the country. As she walked toward the security checkpoint, Sarah Bennett was about to experience an encounter that would change not just her day, but the lives of many others. The security guard, Tom Wilson, had been working at the private terminal for only 2 weeks. At 50 years old, with graying hair and a permanent frown, he took pride in what he called maintaining standards. As Sarah approached, he stepped forward, raising his hand in a stopping motion before she could even reach the security desk. "Excuse me, miss," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the quiet terminal. "The commercial airport entrance is 2 miles down the road. This is a private terminal." Sarah kept her professional smile in place, reaching for her credentials. "Good morning. I have my ID and clearance right here." "Ma'am," Wilson cut her off, speaking slowly as if talking to a child. This area is for private jet clients only. You must have made a wrong turn. Several other travelers glanced their way, some slowing down to watch the scene unfold. Sarah noticed how Wilson had let 3 other executives walk right past him without even checking their IDs. "Sir," Sarah said calmly, still holding out her credentials, "if you could just look at my—" "Listen," Wilson interrupted again, his voice growing irritated. "I don't want to have to call security. This is a restricted area for authorized personnel and private jet owners only." Sarah took a deep breath, remembering similar situations she had faced throughout her career. "That's exactly what I'm trying to show you. I am unauthorized." "Miss, I've been doing this job long enough to know who belongs here and who doesn't," Wilson said, placing his hand on his radio. "Now, I'm trying to be nice about this, but if you don't leave, I'll have to report this as a security breach." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Some people were filming with their phones, while others whispered among themselves. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversations. "Is that Sarah Bennett? Isn't she the CEO of Value Tech? Someone should do something." Captain Rodriguez noticed the commotion from inside and started walking toward the security checkpoint. Sarah held up her hand slightly, signaling him to wait. She had handled discrimination before, and she would handle it again with dignity. "Mr. Wilson," Sarah said, reading his name tag. "I understand you're doing your job. However, I am Sarah Bennett, CEO of Value Tech Solutions. That Gulfstream G650 on the tarmac belongs to my company, and I have a board meeting in New York in 3 hours." Wilson laughed dismissively. "Right, and I'm the King of England. Listen, miss, I don't appreciate people making up stories. Just because you put on a nice suit doesn't mean—" "Is there a problem here?" A sharp voice cut through the tension. Linda Martinez, the terminal manager, had finally noticed the situation. She rushed over, her face showing clear concern. "Just removing someone who doesn't belong here, ma'am," Wilson reported proudly. "She's claiming to be some CEO." "Oh my God," Linda's face paled. "Ms. Bennett, I am so sorry. Please, let me handle this." She turned to Wilson, her voice tight with anger. "Mr. Wilson, this is indeed Sarah Bennett, CEO of Value Tech Solutions. She's one of our most valued clients." Wilson's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, shock, and then embarrassment. The color drained from his face as he realized his massive mistake. Sarah simply stood there, still holding out her credentials that he had refused to even look at. I didn't," Wilson stammered, now looking at the ID badge that clearly showed Sarah's position and credentials. "Miss Bennett, please, let me escort you to your jet," Linda said, glaring at Wilson. "We will deal with this situation immediately." The crowd that had gathered began to murmur louder, some shaking their heads in disgust at Wilson's behavior. Sarah could hear someone say, "That's why she's the CEO and he's just a guard," but she didn't want public humiliation to be the lesson here. As Linda reached for Sarah's briefcase, Sarah held up her hand. The next few moments would define not just how this situation would end, but how it would affect change in the future. Sarah Bennett was about to turn an ugly moment of discrimination into something much more meaningful. Sarah stood calmly at the security checkpoint, watching as Linda Martinez, the terminal manager, tried to handle the situation. But Wilson wasn't backing down easily, even after learning who Sarah really was. His face had turned red, and his embarrassment was quickly turning into defensiveness. "With all due respect, Mrs. Martinez," Wilson said, straightening his uniform, "we need to follow proper protocols. How do we know these credentials aren't fake? Anyone could print a fancy ID card these days." Linda's mouth fell open in shock. "Mr. Wilson, I personally know Ms. Bennett." "It's all right, Linda," Sarah interrupted softly. She pulled out her phone and opened her photos. "Mr. Wilson, would you like to see the picture from last month's Forbes magazine cover? The one where they featured me as Business Leader of the Year. Or perhaps the video from CNBC, where I rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange." Several people in the growing crowd pulled out their phones, quickly Googling Sarah's name. Soon, they were showing each other her pictures and articles. One person even held up their phone, displaying the Value Tech Solutions website with Sarah's picture prominently featured on the leadership page. Wilson shifted uncomfortably, but still didn't move from his position blocking the security gate. Protocols are protocols. We can't make exceptions just because someone is well known. Sarah checked her watch. It was now 8:05 a.m., and her flight was scheduled for 8:15 a.m. The board meeting in New York was too important to miss. ValueTech's new healthcare AI platform could help millions of people access better medical care, especially in underserved communities. Captain Rodriguez and the rest of the flight crew had gathered near the checkpoint. They looked worried about the delay. Sarah's co-pilot, Jenny Chen, stepped forward. "We need to start our final preparations, Ms. Bennett. Should we reschedule the flight?" Before Sarah could answer, Wilson jumped in again. "See? Even the pilot doesn't recognize you. How do we know you're not trying to steal someone's private jet?" A collective gasp went through the crowd. Linda looked like she was about to faint. "Mr. Wilson, that's enough." Sarah remained composed, though her heart was racing. She thought about all the young black girls who dreamed of becoming business leaders. She thought about her mother, who had taught her to face discrimination with dignity. She thought about her responsibility not just as a CEO, but as a role model. "Actually, Mr. Wilson," Jenny spoke up, her voice sharp. "We absolutely know Ms. Bennett. We fly her to meetings 3 times a week. I was asking about rescheduling because you're making our CEO late for an important board meeting." The situation had drawn even more attention. Sarah noticed several phones recording the scene. By tomorrow, this would probably be all over social media. But she didn't want to be known for a viral video about discrimination. She wanted to be known for how she handled it. Linda was frantically calling someone on her phone, probably the airport director. The security staff from other checkpoints were watching nervously. Everyone seemed to be waiting to see what would happen next. Sarah took another calm step forward. "Mr. Wilson, I understand you're trying to do your job. Security is important. But do you check everyone's credentials this thoroughly? Do you question everyone's identity this persistently? Or am I receiving special attention for some reason?" Wilson's face grew even redder. I'm just following." "Following what exactly?" Sarah asked quietly. "Because I've been watching for the past 15 minutes as you let several other executives walk through with barely a glance at their IDs. What's different about me?" The terminal had gone completely silent. Everyone knew exactly what was different, and Wilson had no answer. He stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from the board chairman asking about her arrival time. She knew what she had to do next would not just resolve this situation, but could create lasting change. As she raised her phone to make a call, she was about to show everyone in that terminal what real leadership looked like. Sarah held her phone up, her finger hovering over a contact labeled Governor Williams. The morning sun streaming through the terminal windows caught the diamond on her finger, a ring she had bought herself after taking ValueTech public 2 years ago. "Before I make this call," Sarah said calmly, "I want to be clear about what's happening here. In 10 minutes, I'm supposed to board my company's private jet for a meeting that will bring 5,000 new jobs to this state, but instead, I'm standing here being accused of trying to steal my own airplane." Wilson's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Linda Martinez, the terminal manager, was still frantically trying to reach the airport director. The crowd of onlookers had grown even larger, and the whispers had turned into open discussions about Wilson's behavior. Sarah pressed the call button. The phone began to ring on speaker, echoing in the now quiet terminal. After 2 rings, a professional voice answered. "Governor Williams' office." "Hello, Susan," Sarah spoke clearly. "This is Sarah Bennett from ValueTech Solutions. Is the governor available? I'm afraid I have some concerning news about our development project." Wilson's face turned from red to ghostly white. Linda stopped her own phone call, her eyes widening. "One moment, Ms. Bennett," the voice replied. "The governor left strict instructions to put your calls through immediately." While they waited, Sarah turned to Wilson. "Mr. Wilson, would you like to explain to the governor why his state might lose a billion-dollar technology center? Or should I?" Before Wilson could respond, a new voice came through the speaker. "Sarah, I was just reviewing the proposal for tomorrow's announcement. Is everything okay?" "Good morning, Governor," Sarah replied, maintaining eye contact with Wilson. "I'm actually calling about a slight delay. You see, I'm currently at the private terminal, where one of the security guards is convinced I'm trying to steal my own jet. He won't look at my credentials and has been blocking me from boarding for the past 20 minutes. There was a moment of dead silence on the line. Then the governor's voice came back, sharp and clear. You're telling me that someone is preventing the CEO of ValueTech from boarding her own private jet? The same CEO who's bringing thousands of jobs to our state? That's correct, Governor, Sarah replied. Apparently, according to this guard, I don't look like I belong here. The governor's voice turned stern. Put the terminal manager on the phone. Now. Linda rushed forward, her hands shaking slightly as she took the phone. As she walked a few steps away to speak with the governor, Sarah turned back to Wilson, who looked like he might faint. Miss Bennett, he stammered. I was just trying to protect the terminal? Sarah finished for him. Tell me, Mr. Wilson, what exactly were you protecting it from? A Harvard-educated CEO? A woman who employs 10,000 people? Or was it something else that made you so suspicious? Captain Rodriguez stepped forward again. Miss Bennett, we've adjusted the flight plan. We can still make your meeting if we leave within the next 15 minutes. The airport director, Mr. Thompson, came running into the terminal, out of breath and straightening his tie. He took in the scene, the crowd of onlookers, the pale-faced Wilson, Linda still on the phone with the governor, and Sarah standing calmly in the middle of it all. Miss Bennett, he said, hurrying forward. I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry we are for this incident. Please, let me personally escort you to your aircraft. Sarah raised her hand. Just a moment, Mr. Thompson. Before we move forward, I think we have an opportunity here. An opportunity to turn this unfortunate incident into something positive. Everyone in the terminal waited, watching as Sarah Bennett prepared to transform a moment of discrimination into a catalyst for change. She had worked too hard and come too far to let this moment go to waste. What she would say next would not only address today's incident, but would help prevent similar situations in the future. The terminal remained silent as Sarah turned to address everyone present. The morning sun now streamed fully through the windows, casting a bright light on the scene that had unfolded. Mr. Thompson, the airport director, stood nervously waiting for her next words, while Wilson looked like he wished the ground would swallow him whole. Mr. Thompson, Sarah began, her voice clear and steady. I've been flying from this terminal for 3 years now. Most of your staff has been nothing but professional, but today's incident highlights a bigger problem that exists not just here, but in many places. Linda Martinez finished her call with the governor and returned Sarah's phone, her hands still shaking slightly. The crowd had grown even larger, with airport staff, other executives, and flight crews all gathered to watch. I propose a solution, Sarah continued. Instead of filing complaints or taking legal action, I want to help implement a comprehensive training program. ValueTech has developed an excellent diversity and inclusion program that we'd be happy to share with the airport staff. Wilson's head snapped up in surprise. He had clearly been expecting to be fired on the spot. Mr. Thompson looked equally surprised by this turn of events. Additionally, Sarah said, reaching into her briefcase and pulling out a tablet, I'd like to show you something. She pulled up a presentation and turned it toward the crowd. This is ValueTech's new AI healthcare platform that I'm presenting to my board today. One of its key features is eliminating bias in medical treatment recommendations. She swiped through a few slides, showing graphs and statistics. We found that bias, whether conscious or unconscious, costs lives in healthcare. The same is true in every industry, including aviation security. When we let preconceptions guide our actions, everyone loses. Captain Rodriguez checked his watch and whispered something to Jenny, the co-pilot. Sarah nodded in acknowledgement. They needed to leave soon. Mr. Wilson, Sarah said, turning to face the guard directly. Would you like to know why I didn't immediately call the governor when you first stopped me? Or why I didn't demand to speak to your supervisor right away? Wilson, still pale-faced, managed a small nod. Because change doesn't happen through force or humiliation. It happens through understanding and education. Today could have been just another viral video of discrimination, another angry confrontation. Instead, let's make it a turning point. Mr. Thompson stepped forward, clearing his throat. Miss Bennett, we would be honored to accept your offer of assistance with our training programs. And of course, we will be conducting a full review of our security protocols. Sarah checked her watch, 8:25 a.m. Her board meeting was in less than 3 hours. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. My office will be in touch to arrange the details. Now, if Mr. Wilson would finally like to check my credentials, I do have an important meeting to attend. Wilson's hands trembled as he finally took Sarah's ID and security clearance card. He studied them carefully, though by now it was just a formality. When he handed them back, he couldn't meet her eyes. "Miss Bennett," he said quietly. I'm sorry. I was wrong." Sarah paused as she took back her credentials. "Mr. Wilson, recognizing our mistakes is the first step toward change. I trust you'll participate fully in the new training program." He nodded quickly, relief flooding his face as he realized he might not lose his job after all. Linda stepped forward with Sarah's briefcase. "Your crew has completed all pre-flight checks, Ms. Bennett. You should be able to take off as soon as you board." As Sarah finally walked through the security checkpoint, the crowd parted respectfully. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes, while others were nodding in approval. She had shown them all what true leadership looked like, not just in running a company, but in handling difficult situations with grace and wisdom. Just before she reached the door to the tarmac, Sarah turned back one last time. The scene she left behind would be very different from the one she had walked into an hour ago. Sometimes, the most powerful changes start with a single moment of understanding. As Sarah's private jet soared through the morning sky, the events at the terminal were already creating waves. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages and notifications. Someone had recorded the entire incident, and the video was spreading rapidly across social media platforms. Jenny, the co-pilot, came out of the cockpit with a cup of coffee for Sarah. "Miss Bennett, the video has already reached 1 million views. People are calling you a hero for how you handled it." Sarah took the coffee with a grateful smile. "I'm not interested in being a hero, Jenny. I just want to create real change." She looked out the window at the clouds below. "How long until we reach New York?" "About an hour and 45 minutes. You'll make your board meeting with time to spare." Back at the terminal, things were equally busy but in a different way. Mr. Thompson had called an emergency staff meeting. All security personnel, including Wilson, sat in the conference room, looking nervous and uncomfortable. "This morning's incident was unacceptable," Mr. Thompson said, pacing at the front of the room. "But Miss Bennett has given us an opportunity to do better, and we're going to take it." Wilson sat in the back row, still shaken by the morning's events. His phone kept lighting up with messages from his family. They had seen the video too. His teenage daughter had texted, "Dad, how could you do that? We need to talk when you get home." Linda Martinez stood up to address the staff. "I've just gotten off another call with Value Tech's office. They're sending their head of diversity and inclusion next week to begin the training program. Attendance will be mandatory for all staff." In the break room, other security guards were watching the video on their phones. They could hear Sarah's calm voice asking Wilson about his selective screening process. Some guards looked ashamed, recognizing times when they might have shown similar biases. "Man, she could have gotten us all fired," one guard whispered. "Instead, she's helping us become better at our jobs." Meanwhile, on the jet, Sarah was reviewing her presentation for the board meeting. The healthcare AI platform seemed even more important now after this morning's events. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. "Baby," her mother's voice was filled with emotion. "I just saw what happened. Are you okay?" Sarah smiled softly. "I'm fine, Mom. Remember what you always taught me. When they go low, we go high, but make sure to leave a ladder for them to climb up too." Her mother chuckled through happy tears. "I'm so proud of you, baby. You're changing things, one step at a time." Back at the terminal, Wilson was on his lunch break, sitting alone in the cafeteria. Linda Martinez spotted him and, after a moment's hesitation, walked over to his table. "Tom," she said gently, "are you okay?" Wilson looked up, his eyes red. "My whole family saw it. My daughter won't stop texting me about how disappointed she is. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Linda. I never thought I was, biased." Linda finished for him. "We all have biases, Tom. The question is whether we're willing to recognize and change them." Wilson nodded slowly. "Miss Bennett could have destroyed my career today. Instead, She's offering to help us learn. I've never felt more ashamed or more grateful. By now, news outlets were picking up the story. Headlines read, CEO turns discrimination into teaching moment, and value tech leader shows true class in face of prejudice. In the jet's cabin, Sarah received another message, this time from the governor. Just saw the video. Your grace under pressure is remarkable. Looking forward to tomorrow's announcement. The state needs more leaders like you. Sarah put down her phone and looked out at the endless blue sky. In a few hours, she would present her healthcare AI platform to the board. The morning's incident had only strengthened her resolve to fight bias in all its forms, whether at airport terminals or in healthcare algorithms. The jet cruised smoothly through the clouds, carrying not just a CEO to an important meeting, but a woman who had just turned a moment of discrimination into an opportunity for widespread change. 1 month had passed since the incident at the private terminal. Sarah sat in her office at Value Tech headquarters, reviewing the changes that had taken place. Her wall-to-wall windows offered a stunning view of the city skyline, but her attention was focused on the report in front of her. The airport's new training program had been running for 3 weeks now. Linda Martinez had just sent an email with the first round of feedback, and the results were encouraging. Security staff reported feeling more aware of their unconscious biases and better equipped to handle diverse situations. Sarah's assistant, David, knocked on her door. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Wilson is here for his appointment." She looked up, surprised. Tom Wilson had requested this meeting, and she was curious about what he wanted to say. "Please send him in, David." Wilson entered the office, looking very different from the angry security guard of a month ago. He wore a casual suit and carried a small folder. His face showed nervousness but also determination. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice humble. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Sarah gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please, sit down. How can I help you?" Wilson sat down carefully and opened his folder. "I wanted to show you something. After that day, my daughter Emma wouldn't talk to me for a week. She's 17, and she's never been so disappointed in me before." He pulled out some papers, but then something amazing happened. Emma started researching bias in security screening. She wrote this paper for her high school social studies class about discrimination in aviation security. She got an A+, and her teacher submitted it to a national essay contest. Sarah took the paper, noting the title, Breaking Barriers: How Unconscious Bias Affects Airport Security and What We Can Do About It. "That's wonderful," Sarah said sincerely. "Your daughter sounds very thoughtful." "She is?" Wilson nodded, his eyes getting misty. "And there's more. The training program you provided, it didn't just change how I work. It changed how I think. Last week, I stopped another security guard from profiling a Middle Eastern passenger. The old me wouldn't have even noticed it happening. Meanwhile, in the airport terminal, changes were visible everywhere. New signs highlighted the security screening protocols, making it clear that all passengers would receive equal treatment. The staff wore badges that read, "Committed to Fair Security." Linda Martinez had been promoted to head of security operations, partly because of how she handled the incident. She had implemented a weekly review system where staff could discuss challenging situations and learn from each other. Back in Sarah's office, Wilson had one more thing to share. "Ms. Bennett, Emma is applying to colleges now. She wants to study corporate social responsibility. She says she wants to be like you, someone who doesn't just run a successful business, but makes the world better." Sarah smiled, remembering her own college days. "That's a wonderful goal. Would Emma like to intern at ValueTech next summer? We have an excellent program for students interested in corporate responsibility." Wilson's eyes widened. "Really? That would be." She would be thrilled. As they wrapped up the meeting, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from the governor's office. The new Value Tech Development Center had broken ground. 5,000 new jobs were becoming a reality. Later that afternoon, Sarah had another video call with her mother. "The strangest thing happened today, Mom," she said, telling her about Wilson's visit. Her mother smiled wisely. "You see, baby? Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the biggest changes. You didn't just change one man's attitude, you started a ripple effect." The sun was setting over the city as Sarah finished her workday. On her desk sat a framed article from Business Weekly. Value Tech CEO's response to discrimination sparks industry-wide changes. Next to it was a thank you card from the airport staff, signed by everyone, including Wilson. As she packed up her briefcase, Sarah thought about Emma, Wilson's daughter, and all the young people who would enter the workforce in the coming years. Sometimes, the best way to create change wasn't through confrontation or punishment, but through education and understanding. The security incident had lasted less than an hour, but its impact would be felt for years to come. Sarah had turned a moment of discrimination into a movement for change, one person at a time. 6 months had passed since that memorable morning at the private terminal. Sarah Bennett stood at a podium in the airport's main conference room, addressing a large crowd. Behind her, a banner read Aviation Security Excellence Award, 2024. When I walked into this terminal 6 months ago, Sarah began, I had no idea that a simple journey to a board meeting would lead to such tremendous change. Today, I'm proud to announce that this airport has been recognized nationally for its innovative approach to security training. In the audience, Tom Wilson sat with his daughter Emma, both beaming with pride. Emma had just finished her first month as a Value Tech intern, working directly with the corporate responsibility team. She wore her intern badge proudly, and her notebook was filled with ideas for improving workplace diversity. Linda Martinez, now the airport's security operations director, stood at the side of the stage. Under her leadership, the terminal had become a model for other airports across the country. Their training program, developed with ValueTech's help, was being adopted by airports in 5 different states. But this award isn't just about security procedures, Sarah continued. It's about how we treat each other. It's about recognizing our biases and choosing to be better. Every person who walks through our terminals, whether they're flying commercial or private, deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. The crowd applauded warmly. Among them were several reporters, including one from Forbes magazine working on a feature story titled How One CEO's Response to Discrimination Changed an Industry. Sarah's mother sat in the front row, tears of pride in her eyes. Next to her was Michael, Sarah's driver, who had brought his daughter, now a freshman at Howard University, to the ceremony. The young woman looked at Sarah with admiration, seeing a role model for her own future. 6 months ago, a video went viral, Sarah said, her voice strong and clear. But we didn't let it become just another trending topic. Instead, we turned it into a catalyst for real change. The security staff here didn't just attend a few training sessions, they embraced a whole new way of thinking. Wilson nodded from his seat, remembering how far he had come. His fellow security guards now looked to him as an example of how people could change and grow. He had even been promoted to training coordinator, helping new staff understand the importance of fair treatment. ValueTech's healthcare AI platform, which I was heading to present that morning, is now fully launched, Sarah continued. It's helping hospitals across the country eliminate bias in medical treatment. Sometimes, the most important journeys don't go as planned, but they take us exactly where we need to be. After the ceremony, people gathered for refreshments. Emma Wilson approached Sarah with a thick envelope in her hands. Ms. Bennett, I got accepted to Harvard Business School, and they loved my essay about how you handled the situation with my dad. They said it showed real understanding of leadership and social change. Sarah hugged the young woman warmly. Congratulations, Emma. Harvard is lucky to have you. Later that evening, Sarah sat in her office, looking at a new photo on her wall. It showed her with the airport staff, all wearing their Committed to Fair Security badges. Next to it hung Emma's award-winning essay, framed as a reminder of how change could ripple through generations. Her phone buzzed with a message from the governor. Saw the ceremony coverage. Your new tech center has already created 3,000 jobs. You're changing our state in more ways than one. As the sun set over the city, Sarah thought about that morning 6 months ago. One security guard's bias could have been just another sad story of discrimination. Instead, it had become a story of transformation, education, and hope. Her mother's words rang in her memory. When they go low, we go high, but make sure to leave a ladder for them to climb up too. Sarah had done more than leave a ladder. She had built a whole staircase of opportunity and understanding. The private terminal where it all happened was now known for something bigger than luxury travel. It had become a symbol of how one person's dignity and grace could transform a moment of prejudice into a movement for change. Sarah Bennett hadn't just changed a security checkpoint. She had helped change hearts and minds. one person at a time.